Thank you guys for jumping on, and if you're watching the recording later, thank you for tuning in. This is the latest webinar hosted by the Rural Illinois CT Project here at the Association of Illinois Rural and Small Schools, and we definitely appreciate you taking the time. As you have a moment, feel free to throw your name and your title and your location in the chat. We always like to see where folks are tuning in from. And we've asked folks to stay muted until the question and answer in the end, but always feel free to put your questions and your thoughts and just your support and reactions in the chat. And I'll be keeping tabs on that as we go through. So in case you haven't had the chance to meet me before, just a little bit about the Rural CTE project. My name is John Glasgow. I am the program director for the AIRSS Rural Illinois CTE project. We are a statewide initiative that is hoping to understand and assist with the career technical education, career connected education, professional-based education all across the state of Illinois in our 489 different rural districts. What it distills down to is a lot of research, which is primarily a lot of the work I do is trying to understand what's going on, and then now turning that research into technical assistance. So reaching back out to support educators, schools, teachers of all sort, and students themselves. And this webinar series that we run is one of those pieces of technical assistance where we see, hear of, and come across really great ideas or resources or individuals, and we give them the space to spotlight what they're doing and how that could support rural students in all of their ventures to gain professional skills as they move on through life. So today's topic I'm super excited about because at the end of the day, I really believe that we're all creative beings. I think we find a lot of self-efficacy and worth in being able to do something with our hands, right? And when we think of creativity in the arts, I think we bring our mind most immediately to sort of the fine arts, right? So you think painting, sculpting, even music to a degree. And while that's certainly true, I think any opportunity we have to apply our passion and our vision into doing something, into making something into being, then I think that counts as creativity. And so the resource today that we have to spotlight Toon Boom, I think really gives obviously students interested in design media the skills and opportunities to grow in those, but really it offers all students the opportunity to gain skill sets, tool sets, mindsets that help them into the future. So with that, I want to introduce our two guest speakers today. First off, we have Bernard Boiteux. He is the Educational Sales Director for Toon Boom and has over 30 years of experience in the graphic media field. Over the years, he grew a specific interest in helping build student access, which is what we're all about here, specifically to skills, tools, opportunities to advance within the field that he has worked in. After Bernard, we'll have Hailey Winkleman. She is the founder and owner of Evil Eye Creative Studio, and she also works here at the Association of Illinois Rural and Small Schools. Hailey was born and raised right here in rural Illinois and has seen personally how the arts, media, and communication skills are essential for every rural student. She's used her time in the field to support rural serving nonprofits around the U.S., including right here at AIRSS for about 7 years. So everybody, please join me in welcoming Bernard and Hailey. And Bernard, I'll kick it to you to start off.
Well, thank you, John. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. As John said, my name is Bernard. I've been with Toon Boom for 14 years. I've been lucky enough to have participated and affiliated with schools and governments and studios around the world. And just to kind of give you a little bit of who Toon Boom is, if you don't know who Toon Boom is, we're a software company that has developed technology in conjunction with the studios uh, that have many of the shows that you see on TV made with our tools. So if you watch The Simpsons or Family Guy or Bob's Burgers or the Cuphead Show or the Princess and the Frog, they use our technology to A, either do storyboards or B, do the actual animation. And the technology is only created through the input of the studios. We don't come up and say, hey, we got something cool for you. It's Disney comes up, says, we're working on a show. We need you to create this feature that will simplify the entire creative process. So just to kind of give you an idea of where we're we're working with studios in 136 countries around the world. That includes Disney, Warner Brothers, Nelvana, Nickelodeon, Amazon, and on top of studios in Japan and in Europe. So it is an international kind of industry that Toon Boom works with. And most of those countries that we work with, we're also working with the schools because the key is to help those students get a career, which you will see in this presentation can be very lucrative within this industry. And you've all seen the news where, as an example, where Netflix wants to buy Warner Brothers and Paramount wants to buy Warner Brothers, the whole industry is changing. And what's making it very exciting is a lot of the new ideas and new projects are going on YouTube, going created by young students, young creators. And they don't have to live in Los Angeles or New York City or even in Chicago. They live outside of that because animation is very much like a James Bond movie. It's a lot of people working around the world to get productions done. But we try to be more than just software. We try to be um, a link for schools and studios with every form of creative design. So if you want to become an engineer, if you want to become a computer designer, if you want to go into medical animation, there is a pathway. And as you will see going forward, there's also money associated with that for districts, for schools, to get their students into an industry standards program and have these kids start learning the techniques that they can use within multiple verticals. So, one of the areas that I want to talk about is tax credits. Every state has them. Here's four. One of them is New Jersey. They're trying to entice Netflix to open up a major production hub within that state, which means to get the tax credits, you have to engage with the school system there because it's all tied together. Georgia's the same way. It is very industry related. If you have studios like Trilith, like Tyler Perry Studios, Marvel had a studio there for a while, on top of production studios. They're working with colleges and universities like SCAD and Kennesaw State and some of the school districts to get those kids to come in and learn how to work within the entertainment industry. And 20% is a lot of money that gets kicked back to the schools. California is a great example. We actually had the pleasure and the honor of working with the Department of Education to help write the new animation standards to make sure that the kids that are learning animation actually have the ability to go into the studios within Los Angeles and all across the state. And then recently, Texas, trying to get industry into its state, has created a $1.5 billion investment for the next 10, every year for the next 10 years, which a portion of that is a 2.5% stackable credit to the high schools and to the colleges so they can get that's money that they can use to invest within that industry. And then Illinois, funny enough, strange how I have this slide, has the same type of program, which is the 35% tax credit, which will allow, with the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, to pass those credits on to the schools where the students can buy, or the schools can buy, the technology they need, paid internships where available, and eventually get kids that IMDb credit. And it is obligatory for a studio to work with the educational system if they want the tax credit. How Illinois wrote that rule and law is brilliant. So, what we always talk about is the workforce uplift. as the market is changing, everything's going digital. And the students really need to understand how the digital world, and I know everyone likes to write on paper and draw on paper, but having the understanding of the digital workplace is very important because most of the jobs out there are all digital based. You know, a lot of people don't understand what it takes to work in an artistic environment, and they always think, well, it's painting or it's on paper, and I love drawing on my book, which everyone should do because that is improving your technique. But understanding that when they walk into a Ford or a GM to design a car, you need to know how to do that digitally. So that whole workforce uplift is important. And we try to make sure that there's an ecosystem, excuse me, between the schools, the universities, and industry. And this is something that we try to make sure and help develop in the various regions where we're invited to do so. And then there's economic mobility. You don't have to be, as I said before, in Chicago to do work. You can do everything from Champaign if you wanted to, because that's the way the industry is now. You could be in a beautiful little town that's more affordable and still work on The Simpsons, which is absolutely amazing. And one college I'm going to shout out to is Columbia College of Art and Design. Sorry. Um, yeah, Columbia College of Art and Design. Sorry, I was sick a few weeks back. My brain still hasn't kicked on yet. They have a great program within Chicago, and they're looking for to bring in students who have this skill and technique. So down the road, if you are interested in going, how do I connect with that school? I'd be more than happy to set up those introductions. From there, we're looking at high demand sectors. Gaming interactive is growing. The mobile phones that everyone has is the new platform. They need games. It's the ability for kids to start developing their own business, their own companies. Hybrid productions, merging 2D and 3D assets. So if you're watching a show like Final Space, which is a great one to watch, I love that show, you will see the 2D and the 3D working together. And then there's social content. As I mentioned, YouTube is growing very quickly, and it's going to be the platform that takes over the world in the next 5 years. They need content, and there's where all the studios are going to look for that content. The studios don't really want to create something new because it's very expensive and it's a huge risk for them. They want to understand how to who's watching what, and then they will go and option it as a show. Now, a few weeks ago, John and I had the pleasure of being at the ACTE conference, Vision Conference in Nashville. And I was sitting in a presentation, and the company that was doing this presentation had so much data. It was brilliant. And I needed a few slides that I think are pertinent to help teachers understand where the business is. And especially when it comes to the creative economy. So we're talking about ecosystems. And that's something Toon Boom has spoke about for years. It's making sure there's a relationship between the high schools, the higher ed institutions, and the studios. It doesn't matter what type of studio it could be. It could be an engineering studio. There has to be a pathway. And those transferable skills that you're learning in one actually apply into many others. So this is something that is really important. Those transferable skills that you're learning with Toon Boom can be applied into, and I'll show you slides, medical, legal, engineering, because it's a technique that they're learning. And when we're taking a look at the creative economy, which supports 5.1 million jobs and contributing to $1.3 trillion to the US GDP, that's huge. That's huge to a point where when you take a look at growth within the creative community, it's 11% versus the 7%, which is a national average for rate of growth for jobs. So this is a great way to go. And when you're taking a look at video games and VFX artists and animators, these jobs pay to a point where if you are a VFX animator, an animation animator, you're making about $90,000 a year because here on the I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it says special effects artists and animators. You're looking at 41, almost $42 an hour just for that work. And you're looking at software quality assurance, web and digital interface designers are the top two. So animation does pay. You can have a great career doing that. And, when the national average is $32 an hour, it's a very specialized, it says that it's just a very specialized uh, industry. From there, where does animation also apply to? Well, physics. Physics, absolutely for sure. When you're doing animation, you are using physics, you're using mathematics, you're dealing with biomechanics. So, understanding how things work, that is very much in animation because the 12 principles really focus on that thing. And then, of course, simulation is that visualization of what's going on and what's being created to a point that if you're looking at a engineering pathway, you have to design, you have to draw, you have to understand how that works, and you have to bring an idea that's in your head into a visual space where people can understand what you're doing way before you go to AutoCAD. So you're at the designing phase of what you want to create. The same thing happens when we're dealing with medical visualization. I remember a few years ago, the University of Michigan was looking for professors to help create a medical animation program. And medical animation is one of the few that is using 3D and 2D to explain the cardiovascular system. So it is something that is using the techniques that they're doing early on at school that applies into this. There's also legal forensics. One of my colleagues years ago met a lawyer that says, "Oh no, we have animators in our office because we create videos that when we're in front of the judge and there's a jury, we play those videos because those videos are hot." And people see him and they go, this guy's guilty or this person's innocent. Why? We have the videos to proof. And that is, legal animation. So you're importing 2D, 3D, and that's again, our technology works with those fields. And as I mentioned before, the pathway for gaming and VR, that is growing. That industry is growing, even though we're not seeing VR as much at the consumer level in aerospace, in military, it is everywhere. So this is an avenue that these students are going to learn again, going back to the foundationals. And then of course, the soft skills, the interaction, the communication that they need to have with their colleagues because for lack of a better example, animation is very much like a football line. And yes, Chicago, way to go, going to in the playoffs. But everyone has to communicate on that. Every play has to be timed properly. And animation is very much like that because when you're working on a show like The Simpsons or a Mickey Mouse project, you need to work very quickly. You need to communicate because you have to get that project out quickly. And the other element that comes in, we're seeing the shift from STEM to STEAM. I've spoken with schools in California, I've spoken with schools in Georgia, and they're going, yeah, 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 we're bringing the arts back in. That opens up a whole new avenue for you because it works with math. You are using, coordinate systems, you're doing Bezier curves. There's a whole golden ratio that deals with drawings. The kids don't realize they think they're creating a character, but there's a whole bunch of mathematics that's involved to create it. Same thing when we're looking at the science, the visual. I'm a very visual person. I had problems in school because I have ADHD and dyslexia that until I actually saw it, I got that aha moment. And years ago, I was talking with a bunch of teachers at junior high, and they were talking about that's how they knew which students understood where the planets go because they would just have them quickly sketch it out, and then they could go, okay, you got those planets mixed up. It's a great way and a fast way for a teacher to comprehend who gets it and who doesn't and what can happen. Same thing when it comes to history. You can actually recreate um, the Battle of Bunker Hill or Iwo Jima or whatever the case, because again, it's that visual aspect. They will retain it more, and there's something about animation where you sit back and you go, "I get it, I understand it," and the fact that they have to work on it and think about it, it makes their ideally grades improve. And teachers that I've spoke to that have incorporated animation and I'll use Toon Boom into the classrooms have seen a marked improvement on performance of the students, which is great because again, they have to work together. You cannot create something on your own because you'll never get it done. And especially in animation, you need that team. It's that McDonald's line. Everyone's working to get that burger out, looking the same way, tasting the same way, no matter where you are in the world. Same thing with animation. If you get Mickey Mouse and there's 10 people working on that Mickey Mouse, you have to create it the exact same way because it is a branded character. When we're talking about critical visual literacy, that's where animation really comes into fruition because it's that those points where a student will come in and sit down and they might not be able to put two and two together when they're looking it on a page. But the moment that they start seeing it visually changes their landscape. As I said, I have dyslexia, and for the longest time, it took me a while to really start putting things together and learning how to draw. I had an idea in my head, and then I would sketch it out somehow, and I realized, well, this is what they were trying to explain. The other part is the new writing. Video creation is the fundamental communication across all industries. You need this board. You need to put an idea on paper. And when you're looking at a storyboard, which is an essential for any live action TV, film production, any animation, any game, any building you want to sketch and say, we're going to put a new tall building in Chicago, you need to sketch that out. You need to really put everything on paper. And Ford and GM, which have animation departments, have to design a new car a week. They have to put it through all its paces and get the ideas out there what this car is going to look like, what these pieces are going to do. And they can't talk about it. It's okay, draw it and show me and go from there. So, kind of with that said, the last kind of is how Toon Boom fits within the classroom. The best situation is always turning the classroom into a studio where everyone has a role, has a job, has a space, and they all work together. And when we've seen schools like working in that capacity, again, performance, engagement, marks go through the roof. And to a point, high schools are now competing in this contest called the 24 Hours of Animation, which is absolutely insane. It's put on by the University of California at Long Beach. And you have universities and art schools from around the world competing. And now you got high schools showing up and they're placing really well. They're beating out some major, major name school teams. And these are high school kids, which is absolutely amazing. So as we move forward, I just want to be conscious of time. Um, we developed two pieces of software. Storyboard Pro is our pre-production software. This is what's used, as I indicated before, to sketch out ideas, import scripts, time out, what your scene is going to look like. And then once you get that feel, that beat within the storyboard, you would import it into Harmony, and then you're working your animation and you're doing your 3D, you're importing live action scenes, you can rotoscope, it opens up. But storyboarding is where projects live or die. So if a student, has a reading issue, they can actually import a script and then work with other people to create what that scene will look like within the software. So it's a great way to help kids better connect with language. And I think that's always important because when you look at results, not just nationally, but internationally, people don't read as much anymore. And you need to really understand that, especially as we all know, when you go to university, you have to read so much. And most of the time, it's gibberish. But this will help to some extent when you're working in the entertainment industry. So, when we're looking, as I said, storyboarding is literacy, it's planning, it's pitching. This is everything that's important. If you don't have a great storyboard and you go to Disney and you go, I got this show and show me your storyboard, and it doesn't pop, it doesn't hit, you're not getting any money. That's how important it is. If you're at Ford and you're sketching out a car and you go, oh, this is going to look great, and it doesn't hop off the page or hop off the screen, they're going to go, it's missing something, go back to the drawing board. This is the drawing board. This is essential for every kid in every school to be learning how to do, because when you think about it, if I'm going to build a bookcase, I'm going to draw it. It's as simple as it gets. We talk about animatics. So when we're looking in, an animatic is okay, I have a sequence of images together. I'm running it to see how it looks, how it feels. Does it hit all the marks? Is it something that I think people would like to see? That is so important. And the blueprint of a show in the animatic, it has your sound, it has your timing. And again, everyone has to work together. It also deals with camera language. So if I'm Steven Spielberg and I'm going to create a new movie, I have to put everything on a storyboard. I have to time it out perfectly because once I bring on the actors and I bring on the crew, I really need to make sure it comes to life. Can I change it? Absolutely. So if you're watching shows like Walking Dead or The Marvelous Miss Maisel or Mr. and Mrs. Smith, they all use Storyboard Pro way before they start committing the actors. This is where the show, as I said, the story, the show lives or dies, and they will go and they will re revisit a scene over and over again until they get it right. I actually know one of the storyboard artists who worked on Walking Dead also worked on Stranger Things. And I was so upset with him because he posted something, and I go, "Wait a second, that hasn't come out yet." So yeah, storyboards are essential. And then when I saw the scene, I went, "Damn it! I knew it's going to happen." So that is really important because any field they want to go into that deals with camera, they need to be able to tell the story with it. Then we go into Harmony, as it says here, is the powerhouse. This does everything. It works traditional hand drawn like The Simpsons. It can do puppets like Rick and Morty. It can do 2D, 3D like a Cuphead show. There's so many things that you can do with Harmony. You can even make a game with it. So it works with Unity. It works with Unreal Engine. It works with any game engine you want to do. And that is the freedom because we really want the artists to not be limited by the technology with their creativity. They want to just grow. They have an idea, and we try to make sure we have an environment where they can go, hey, let's throw this in, and it will work. So you can even import FBX and OBJ 3D models into it. And then we talk about rigging. So a show like Rick and Morty, it's not traditional hand-drawn animation. It's you're creating a character and then you're breaking it up into its components. So my hand, my forearm, my shoulder, and then I'm manipulating that. And then I'm doing a keyframe. The bulk of the shows right now on TV are rigged because it's about timing. It's about getting a show out within a 3 week period, which is what a lot of them have to deliver on. And they could be as simple animation as a kid's show or very complex animation like Tangled the series. And look that up. It's absolutely beautiful. You swear it was 3D. It's all puppet, it's all rigged. And it doesn't take away from the story, it doesn't take away from doing something organically like you would in a hand drawn animation like Bugs Bunny or Miyazaki, one of his movies, but it speeds up the process and at times simplifies how it's done. And when we're looking at a rig, we're talking about node views. If you do 3D, that's node view. Everything kind of ties together and aligns together with other stuff. And then, as mentioned before, we partnered with the state of California. Those standards are available. If you're thinking about bringing it in, you want to bring animation in, I would go grab those standards and take a look at what it is because that is what Disney needs. That's what Warner Brother needs. And we even created a courseware, an LMS courseware platform that simplifies the teaching of animation to the kids. And maybe you don't have a background in it. You don't necessarily need it because we tried to make sure it was a teacher in a box where you will understand how it's done. You will get all the concepts, but the students are doing all the work because not everyone knows how to do it, but they like to bring it into the classroom. And the important part, yes, we're covered by Perkins. 100%. I have so many districts that ask me that question. Are you guys Perkins? Yes, we are. So you can get your software, you can get your hardware, you can get training, you can get um, field trips if you wanted to with Perkins. It's a great way to go, and it's an inexpensive way to get upgrade your classrooms into that environment. We also offer, so you know, certification, which is industry recognized. We are on in Florida, we're on the CAPE list. In Texas, we're on the T list. We're in Indiana, we're in South Carolina. There's a lot of other states where our certification is recognized because depending on the state, teachers get money back or schools get money back somewhere. So, when we're taking a look at our curriculum, it is comprehensive. It is pre production, so we do storyboarding. It is production, you get animation, you get harmony, you get all that stuff. And then you get the post production. And again, that applies to engineering, it applies to every other field out there that we addressed earlier because it's the same, it's really the same thing, they just applying it differently. And as we kind of wrap up here, the feedback is the important part, and especially when you're working with students. I've had high schools being mentored by Disney, by Nickelodeon, and the feedback they were getting from those directors and those producers and writers was amazing. And there are, as I said, I could easily connect you to CCC in Chicago, and they would be more than happy to talk to you and even connect you to a studio. And I know Hailey will be able to touch upon this herself, so I don't want to take anything away from her. And we do have, and if you are interested, and we do have a risk-free program. If you want to try to your school, we have a pilot program that's set up for you. You get the software, you get the courseware, you get the onboarding of from one of our specialists, and it's a great way to test it out. And you can easily go to your superintendent and go, "I'd like to try this. Maybe it's this session, or maybe it's in the fall." It's low cost for sure. And again, Perkins will cover it. The other part is if you really want to do it, we're offering teachers certification for free. You get courseware, you get a software to play with. Um, it's if you do, especially if you're going for the pilot, it all ties together. And you can reach us at bernard@toonboom.com. As a member for the association, we'll do whatever it takes for you to get it into your schools. Basically, anything on that one. And so I'll pass it over to Hailey.
Thank you. Let me go ahead and pull up my slides because everyone loves to have slides I've found at these things, right? So as everyone see it okay? Good. Okay. So as John mentioned, I am the founder and owner of Evil Eye Creative Studio. I am based out of Galesburg, Illinois currently, but I'm from Carmi, Illinois, which is a small town in southern Illinois. And I've been doing this work for about 7 years. A lot of people say, what is it exactly that you do? And it's a few things. I think I opened the wrong window. I did. Great. Um, so communications is a very broad field. It's a lot of different things. It's graphic design, it's web design, it's copywriting, it's marketing, it's analytics, it's data, all working together to get out a message. And graphic design, in the way that I was trained in it at Southern Illinois University Carbondale, is really a communications focused study because anytime you're making something, you're trying to communicate an idea. And a lot of what Bernard was saying was really touching on that. You're trying to show other people your idea. You're trying to take someone's idea and communicate it visually. And that's really how I approach all of this work. So, a little bit about me and a fun photo collage so you can look at something while I'm talking. As I mentioned, I'm from a small town and I do work with the Association of Illinois Rural and Small Schools. I am the communications director for that organization, as well as the Arizona Rural Schools Association and the National Rural Education Association. I also am involved in community theater. I love basically all the forms of arts. I play instruments, I've done community band. The very first picture over here on the left is me graduating with my principal, who is now the superintendent in that area. And I have my dogs because I know they'll come up at some point and you have to pay the puppy tax. I'm very passionate about ancient history, particularly Greco-Roman art. So it's actually where evil eye comes from, is from the idea of an evil eye. In Greek art, they have the charm that they make. So that's actually not in Greece, that's in Rome, but it goes with it. That's me buying a house in my rural town just because I think it's interesting. And then this is actually my senior thesis project from when I was in school. So I actually did an animation project and a website based around children's media and how it communicates ideas and things of that nature. So moving on. So when a lot of people think of graphic design, they think of something like this, which is a simple graphic. It's got words and pictures and icons on it.
Sorry,
So
Haley, we can't see your images.
are you serious? Oh my goodness.
Sorry.
I was like, the chat's coming up, but I can't open it. I'm sharing my screen. Let me redo it. Well, then I will go back and just let you look at my pictures for a second, but then I will carry on. Thank you for saying something because I couldn't see anyone talking. Oh, that's why. I had shared a window instead of the whole screen. That's what was going on. Now can everyone see? Good. So these were all the pictures that I was talking about very briefly, and now I'll carry on. Okay, so when you think of graphic design, you probably think of something like this. So everyone can see this very nice, square, clean, neat graphic that we shared to promote this webinar that we are currently at right now. And this is sort of what I do a lot of the time. I take ideas, I take communication, I take events, and I condense it down in a visual format, very clean to communicate. The first and foremost goal of all graphic design is communication. But I would never have gotten to doing this if I hadn't started out doing this. So growing up, I was really into art and drawing. These are actually more recent, but they're not super current. They're just things that I've drawn over the years. And so I actually, in eighth grade, remember downloading a Toon Boom demo because I did frame by frame animation in MS Paint at the time. So I've also done some of that work too. And as Bernard was talking about science and educational purposes, I was like, I really wish I pulled at least a clip of the video I made for Mole Day when I was in high school, because I made an animation about the mole, 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd. And my teacher still shows it, which is a little bit embarrassing, but that's okay. And I also always emphasize to people, if I weren't creative and I weren't a drawer, if I weren't someone who was using that creative juice, I would have struggled a lot more becoming a designer because a lot of the work comes before you go to the computer, and a lot of the work is ideation. It's creative ideation. And so a lot of my colleagues struggled with this because maybe they weren't a drawer, or they thought, well, I'm just going to open a software on the computer and I'll figure it out. And so this is showing everything on the left of the screen are the ideas I had and the sketches I had before I finally came up with the final version on the right side of the screen. And so it takes a lot more time and effort, even for something that seems simple, to find the right way of going, this is what I'm trying to communicate and what I'm trying to get across to people. And so a lot of what Bernard was talking about and what I totally agree with is that creativity, yes, can apply into these forms, but it doesn't just apply into these forms. Having that creative energy, creative thinking, design thinking helps you to find new ways of looking at things, ways to think outside of the box, ways to communicate ideas, or to take what someone is saying and say, maybe this is what you mean by this, and have that dialogue where you can work together to create great communication and great ideas and put them on the page. So, the last thing I really want to talk about is why I do what I do. I am really passionate about young people having opportunities in rural places. So, all these photos are kind of showing things that I do in my hometown community. And this top picture of all the kids making silly faces in their Seussical costumes were all interns at the high school that worked for me. So when I lived there, I had students who were doing graphic design work, doing photography work, doing videography work for me while they were still in high school. And actually, Caitlin, who's in the yellow bird costume, helped me do a signage campaign, a huge signage campaign, metal produced signs, custom cuts that are still out there, and they'll hopefully be there for a very long time before she ever graduated high school. So I volunteered in the theater department. I did all their signage, all their t-shirts, everything for about 5 years before I moved locations. And they actually called me up last week and said, do you think you could still print our t-shirts for us and ship them to us? Because we just love working together so much. And then this bottom picture is Pets at Risk, and that's a domestic animal service organization, nonprofit. And we did pictures with Santa every year. And, we logistically planned that event, made sure that we had people making sure the dogs were safe and the kids were safe because a lot of kids would come. So everything that I do is community focused and youth focused. Because when I was in high school, I had one teacher who ran an elective Photoshop class. And when I took that class, I realized, oh, I can apply my creative knowledge into something else using this technology. And not to say that creative work isn't a real job, because a lot of people were discouraging me at that time and saying, you're drawing all the time. Why don't you go to business school? Why don't you do something lucrative? It is lucrative, but that's not all of its value. But it is. It is lucrative. And I learned so much by having that opportunity in school that it sort of exploded into everything else that I've done my whole life. So the small pat on the back is that I have been more receiving awards and things. Probably the one that no one is going to know what it is this Rickert Ziebold Trust Award. And I actually won that for an animation project at my college. So you submit your project and all of your information to receive a gallery space, and then they curate the curators go about the gallery space and decide who wins the award. You might notice it's the 2020 award. That was a special year where they actually just gave everyone the award, but I'm still proud of it because I did get to, for a short time, exhibit in that space and I did get a cash prize for it. So that's my overview. It's a little bit short and sweet because I wanted to leave time for everyone to discuss, share any questions you might have. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen because the one award that I can't fit on the screen, because I don't know how yet, is this crazy clear looking thing. And this was for working with AIRSS to pass Senate Bill 1787 for forming our Rural Ed Council. So through creative work, I've not only built a business, I'm supporting young people in my home community and beyond. We've passed legislation, and a big portion of that was communication and was putting out a graphic that said, "We need your help. Go sign this letter of support. We need you to be doing this." You guys are here right now because you got an email or saw a Facebook post or something of that nature. But I never would have done any of that if I weren't the kid that was drawing all the time. So that's sort of my spiel. I'm sort of the case study of a creative person, including the little bit of awkwardness here and there. And I'll pass it back to John.
Yeah, thank you, Haley. Thank you, Bernard. Both of you. Very much appreciate you coming just to share what you're up to, and the value of creativity in CTE in general. We are question and answer, so anybody who has thoughts, throw them in the chat. Come off mute, ask what you have. I kind of had a spur of the moment sort of impromptu idea. I might kind of roundtable panel this with you guys because I have some questions that I think apply to both of you, and I'd just like to hear your thoughts. Um, so I guess Haley, starting with you, listening to, your presentation about your story there, um, I wondered if you could share a bit about, as a rural student, how did you learn these skills? How did you access these skills? Because we know from our data collection from across the state of rural districts here in Illinois, arts, communication, entertainment, those are typically the least offered types of programs, and rural districts are often the least able to expand into them. So I'm curious to hear your story there.
Yeah, and that's a really good question because I totally blanked on mentioning it at all. So I have always been someone who likes to draw, and my parents thankfully were very encouraging in that, but we did not have necessarily dedicated arts programs in our schools to that extent. So in middle school, when I really started getting into animation particularly, we had art as a rotating quarterly class. And so you'd have art, you'd have home ec, you'd have a math thing and one other thing that you rotated out of each quarter. So for 3 months out of the year, you had art class. And usually it was not very intensive because you didn't have time to get into a big project. And then in high school, art was an elective class. You had to go through sort of the basic one, but it wasn't necessarily as robust as some other programs I've heard of. And my senior year, I actually, because of scheduling, was not in art class at all. So it was sort of a toss up if you would have that exposure in school. And I've definitely had that with the students I worked with. They said, "I want to do photography." And I said, "Oh, awesome. I just did a session. You can help me do the editing because that is like 90% of photography." And after 1 hour, they said, "I don't want to do photography." So getting that exposure was super important because I think that student actually was like, "That's what I want to go to college for, is photography." And I was like, "Are you sure? Are you 100%? Because it's a lot of work." That's sort of a sidebar. So how I sort of discovered it, I suppose, was the internet, using YouTube, watching videos. The animation community at that time did memes together where one person would make something and then like literally you would watch it and then draw your character doing it and like copy it. So a lot of what I did was copying other people and practicing their animation. And then Bernard sneakily mentioned the 12 principles. And I was like, I know what he's talking about. There's a very famous book, the animator's Bible, basically. And someone gave that to me as a gift. And I was like going through it and doing all of the practice walk cycles and bouncing ball and everything that's sort of the first thing you do in animation. And then my brother got me access to the Adobe Suite, and I started learning how to do rigging, more of the puppet style animation. And like I said, I did a trial of Toon Boom when I was in eighth grade because an animator I liked on YouTube said, I used Toon Boom to make this. And I was like, what's that? So a lot of it was sort of finding it myself. But now that I'm older, I like to share what I know with young people because I know that everyone won't just find everything themselves. So a lot of my work with my students has been, well, you could use Illustrator. Affinity is free and sort of the alternative, but it has different use case, like different copyright cases and things like that. You can use Canva, but be careful. They use a lot of AI generated images if that's not something you want to be doing. So there's a lot that goes into it now that I'm more in the mentor area than the learner area. So that was maybe a bit of a ramble, but I think I answered the question.
I appreciate it. And I feel like there's a lot of rural students who are in a very similar boat, right? Like I remember going to school here in Monmouth, Illinois, and we definitely had rotational art for some of our grades, right? So I guess Bernard, similar question to you, kind of a corollary actually. So, since we're speaking and representing districts here that may have art or may not at all and don't really have a basis for where this might fit in, how does Toon Boom typically integrate into a school, or what recommendations might you have there?
So normally the way when a school pulls us in, they have a computer lab already, or they're looking to bring one in because getting into the digital workplace is becoming very important to many districts. It's a necessity now. So they look at the opportunities. Well, I got to buy computers. The students like to draw. We got a club or we have something there, and then they start pulling us in. And what normally happens is they will contact us and they'll start off with storyboarding. Something super simple, super easy because it's just panels and scenes. You don't even have to do anything like very robust. It could be stick figures. I remember there was a show years ago that was an animated series with just stick figures. And they would learn how to time out. They would learn how to create their own little mini movies. And then from there, once we incorporated the courseware, we saw more and more schools really jump on, more districts, because the biggest challenge wasn't the students per se, it was the teachers not having that background. They have some art background coming out of university, but they never figured out how to do it. And a great example was Beverly Hills High School. The teacher used to work years and years ago in the industry, but never did it. But his kids were really interested in doing it. They pulled it in, and his kids started surpassing him and started teaching the class. And I had more and more schools tell me, yeah, we started having our kids teach animation because they're taking the courseware and they're just running with it because suddenly they feel that they're part of a process. And I know it's a little long with the question, but it always starts off with a simple, let's do one lab, let's do the pilot, let's try it, let's see if it's something that we can get into the curriculum for the following year. But we need to beta test somewhere, and it's usually at the district's art school or the school that has a computer program, and they kind of start at that location. But I've seen districts, and I'm just thinking of Hillsborough County Public School in Florida. They started off with three schools. They have a lot of schools, and then it ended up in 27 of their high schools, and the engagement was through the roof, where kids are taking the certification exam and passing. And we saw the same thing in Georgia, and we're seeing the same thing in California. Kids are just looking for an avenue to create, share their ideas, put something on YouTube at one point, which is a totally different session, because that is really the future. And they start thinking like business people. How do I market it? How do I brand it? How do I make a t-shirt? And I grew up kind of like John in the country. I went to a regional high school. We didn't have any of that. Computers, when, sorry, I'm of a certain age. Computers were coming in and everyone was just learning that. But if you wanted to be in an arts program, you had theater or you had music, but I like to draw. I used to like to draw cartoons, and there was no avenue for me. And now I see kids everywhere. They're making amazing stuff. So yeah, it starts off simply with storyboarding and taking the kids, funny enough, that have some form of learning challenge with language and putting them in that classroom with storyboard where they're importing the script, and then they have to work together and say, okay, we're going to do, picking Romeo and Juliet. Let's do a simple scene just to see if they understand it. And it just opens up their mind because they're just kind of, they're visualizing it. They have to put it together. They have to work together. And suddenly that kid's not isolated anymore. So yeah, so sorry, it was a long answer to a short question.
No,
Sorry, John.
I like conversation, so I think it's fine. And so then do you find that once schools bring in Toon Boom, does it, as it develops, does it sort of stay in the like the computer lab or art class, or does it expand into even some of the core content?
It it depends on the mandate of the district. So I've seen it apply to in districts that are more economically challenged, like music. It thrives. It's an avenue for people to tell their own stories. They have to write to tell their own stories, and then they have to animate it. Makes a teacher's life simple. Then you have other scenarios where it starts off in one place, and there's a school in Canada where the high school was visual minorities. They started one classroom. Now it's the entire school, to a point where they're creating games. They're doing stuff for Academy Award winners. They're putting stuff on the ice for the NHL games. These kids are kicking butt, and the universities are running to that school to grab those kids with a free ride. And again, whoever thinks of Winnipeg, right? It's if you know Canada, it's Minnesota, and then you go north. And if you see a bear, you've gone too far. But that's kind of the scenario. It's they've got a whole gaming lab, and it is amazing what the right a passionate teacher and passionate students can do. And the universities that are coming to that school and going, how do we get this kid into my place? You only hear that in sporting. You don't really hear that. Maybe music, maybe some sciences, but in the rural areas, very rare. And this they go to. So it's a great avenue.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Again, folks have questions, feel free to chime in. You can raise your hand. I can call anyone, put it into the chat. I guess just one more for now that I want to start with Haley on, but really for both of you, do you see a need and value of creativity in all professions beyond just the obvious ones with creativity?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Absolutely, yes. So I'm very fortunate to work in a mostly creative field at this point, but that's not always been the case. I've worked in fast food, I've worked in retail, I've pounded the pavement in some other places, and it's still important to learn how to solve problems. It's still important to learn how to communicate. Communication, honestly, is one of the most important skills you can have, period, in my opinion, in any field at all. Because if you can create this amazing, Bernard was using the example of a car, and you're like, here, I made a car. They'll go, tell me why the car is good. I see your model. It looks cool. Does it function? And you have to explain. And that's a lot of what design thinking is. That's a lot of what my program at SIU was not only making the thing, but every single day we had to hang our things on the wall and explain them and say, and the reason I chose green is, and the reason I chose that font is, and the reason so we had to explain our work. And so communication, first and foremost, yes, 100%, everything you're ever doing, you're going to have to make a presentation. You're going to have to embarrassingly not show your presentation in the Zoom call. You're going to have to do different things that have a visual aspect as well in a corporate setting, in an engineering setting. My brother works in information systems technology. He has had to do presentations on that very complex subject to say, here's what we need to do to implement X, Y, and Z. I don't fully understand his job. That's not my job. So, yes, 100% creativity, creative thinking. And I used to speak at a CEO class every year. And the first thing I did was hand out blank sheets of paper and say, let's all just like sketch for a minute. And they would all look at me like,
What?
I'm like, it doesn't matter if it's good, but it loosens you up to creative thinking. So that my short answer is yes. My long answer is everything I said.
If I may add, my mother grew flowers, and she had to figure out color schemes because she would make these big, beautiful bouquets and presentations for these ritzy hotels. And she had to learn what colors go with what and what doesn't set people off. So even something as simple as flower arrangement, you need to understand the color wheel. And funny enough, I was talking to people at Disney, and they go, "We need art directors, people who understand color scheme, because if they don't, people's heads will explode." And I'm like, "Oh, what a great side career! Whose head can I make explode?"
Awesome. Any other questions from folks out there? Anything you're curious about?
Nothing. Come on, you're all teachers. You're supposed to be doing that to your students.
But we're both fantastic communicators, so I guess we just
Maybe,
covered
Hailey.
everything,
The
right?
three of us, we should have a show.
Actually, a while back, I worked on a podcast logo that John and I could start called Fools Rarely Differ. I found that when I was scrolling through my sketches to decide what to put on my slides.
That's hilarious.
It was a tough choice, friends, of what to put on there. I have some funny drawings.
Well, then I think just one final one, and we can close this out here. If nothing else, what would be one thing you hope that schools take away from our conversation today to help open students to new skills, to expand access in ways that they may not have traditionally?
I think, yeah, I think as a teacher, it's or any school, getting kids engaged is the hardest thing out there. And the when I talk to teachers and they say, I kind of hit the wall, and my son's a teacher, hit the wall, and then suddenly you have an opportunity to change things up. And as Hailey said, draw on that blank piece of paper, it changes everything in the classroom because it gives them something to look forward to. It gives them the ability to tell their own story, like music, like rap. When you think about it, in the '80s, it was that avenue for getting an idea out. I know, again, as a kid growing up in a rural area, I look for that. And if you have the opportunity, pull it in and just try it, do it. And if you want to have a demo or have some more technical conversations, please, Bernard at toonboom.com. We'd be more than happy to show you, talk as much time as you want and need, and kind of share stories and even sometimes connect you to other schools. We'd be more than happy to do that.
I would say it's not always an option in a small school to have a dedicated course. So finding ways to implement it into your existing course, which I know is already a big ask because there's so many things you have to cover in the day to day. But I mean, I can think of being in a class and it's like, okay, there's 5 minutes after the bell rings where no one's really doing anything, and maybe there's a prompt on the board, draw a picture of what you did this weekend. Or I know a lot of teachers have started doing, it looks like a pumpkin, but it's like, what else could this pumpkin be? Complete the drawing. So there are ways to implement creativity, small ways that I agree with Bernard. It really just opens your mind in a different way, and I think gets you ready for learning, honestly. I was one of those kids that was visual. Reading is a challenge for me. I read the same sentence 500 times and don't retain it. But whenever we could watch a brain pop video, like I got it, you know? So I think there are a lot of ways to implement the visual arts and creativity into existing coursework. But I also am one of those people that's like, I'm not the gatekeeper. I'm not the person who's gonna say, so go figure it out. Like, I'm more than happy to share more of my experiences or what I have knowledge in if it would be of any help. So you can find my email on the AIRSS website because I it's on there. It's info@airsedu.org. And that will send anything. If you have any questions about this, I can also get it to John as well. So
All right. Well, again, I very much appreciate the both of you taking the time to share about your work and what you have to offer here. It was wonderful to hear about, how creativity and communications is essential for rural schools, and it's not outside of the capacity of rural schools and rural students to access. So, thank you so much. And for everybody who came in, who's tuning in later, I look forward to seeing you in our next webinar. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
thank
Cheers.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.